Jane Austen is one of the most famous and best-selling novelists of all time. She's most famous for her 6 major novels set at the end of the 18th century, which comment on the British landed gentry at the time. I am going to rank them. Hopefully this is just a helpful guide where to start. My number 6 is Mansfield Park. Now, Mansfield Park follows Fanny Price, who is a poor relation living with her rich aunt's family in Mansfield Park. Her only friend is her first cousin Edmund, who she's also in love with, which is just... I know you're not supposed to morally judge 18th century fictional characters by modern day standards, but I find that quite hard reading, so I do judge a little bit. So Fanny Price is our heroine, and I have complicated feelings about Fanny Price. She's very moral, she's kind, she's quiet, introverted, but she just lets everyone walk all over her. People are awful, people are really horrible to her, and she just takes it.
Now what have you done, Fanny? If all you can do is make mischief, we're better off without you.
She's also, I mean, she's a nice person, so I can't complain too much. Then again, also what I would choose for Fanny isn't what she would choose for herself, so there's also that. But she is true to herself and her feelings throughout the novel, and she has a real stoicism, which I do admire. The novel is far from boring though. You have these 2 siblings, Henry and Mary Crawford, who move into the neighbourhood and they massively shake things up. All the young people end up putting on this play, and that unleashes them all, and there's relationship drama and marriages and all of the stuff that you'd expect from Jane Austen. Something I really like is the fact we get discussions about slavery, which is not something you associate Jane Austen with, but it was all happening in the same period, so it's nice to see it addressed. Number 5 is Northanger Abbey. I mean, I could have easily put this at number 6 and Mansfield Park at number 5, but this is the way around I decided to put it. I love Northanger Abbey because it's a novel about novels and imagination, and everything runs away from you. So our protagonist is Catherine Morland, and she is obsessed with novels, and particularly Gothic novels, and she likes to imagine that she's in one. So she's a very fun heroine. She's young, she's 17 years old, quite naive, and she travels with some friends to Bath, which is debaucherous and stylish and fashionable place where everybody goes. In Bath, she meets Henry Tilney, who's a young, charming clergyman. Yes, there is a young, rich, charming clergyman in Jane Austen. They do exist. The plot of Northanger Abbey is quite simple, which makes sense because it was Austen's first novel. She is invited to stay at Northanger Abbey, which is Henry Tilney's family pile, essentially, and it's very Gothic. It's very much to Catherine's taste, and her imagination runs away with her, and it lands her in a bit of trouble because she starts having all these thoughts about the house and Henry's family, and it all just... Jane Austen hasn't yet developed her social commentary to the standard and the level that it is in her other novels, but we do get to see the dark side of Regency life in Bath with all its debauchery and seductions, and again, I very much enjoyed this novel, but I enjoyed the others more. My number 4 pick is Sense and Sensibility. Now, this novel follows 2 sisters, Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood. Their father dies and they have to move to Devon with their younger sister and their mother to rent out a little cottage from some distant relations. The 2 sisters have very contrasting personalities. The joy of the novel is to watch their relationship and the way that they deal with situations very different ways.
What care I for Coles when there is such a man?
You will care very much when your nose swells up.
Eleanor is the sense of the novel. She is reserved, kind, sensible. She's very much the rock of the family. And Marianne is the sensibility. She is passionate, emotional, unguarded. They both fall in love at different points in the novel. Obviously, it's Jane Austen. And they both deal with it very differently. Eleanor internalises everything, whereas Marianne externalises everything. Plot-wise, it contains very similar motifs and incidences, Pride and Prejudice. I would say it's the darkest of Jane Austen's novels. There's seduction and disapproving relatives, and generally characters get what they deserve. The only bad thing I would have to say about it is that a 17-year-old and a 36-year-old getting married, I still find a little weird. My number 3 is Persuasion. Persuasion was the last Jane Austen novel that I read, and it was also the last that she wrote. It's quite autobiographical, and I'd say the saddest. So our protagonist in Persuasion is Anne Elliot, who is disregarded by the family that she lives with. She's quiet, reserved, kind. When she was 19, she falls in love with Frederick Wentworth and is persuaded by her family to give him up when he proposes because he's not rich enough for them, he's not titled enough for them. 8 years later, we find Anne still unmarried and the family is in financial difficulty. So her father and her elder sister have moved to Bath and she is on her way to join them, except she stays to live with her sister so she can see tenants installed in their old home. Who are these tenants, you ask? Why, none other than the sister and brother-in-law of now Captain Frederick Wentworth, and he has come to stay to find a wife. It's interesting because this is a novel where we have two characters who already have an established history and a relationship, and that's not something that Jane Austen has ever really done before. And it's interesting in the fact that there's not actually that much dialogue between them for most of the novel. I quite like sad things, but I don't like it when people are too piney and lovesick, and this seems to walk the line between those very well. In terms of writing ability, this is Jane Austen at her best. There are funny moments and sad moments, and it all weaves together really nicely. Pride and Prejudice is my number 2 pick. What can I say about Pride and Prejudice? We follow Elizabeth Bennet, who is the second of 5 sisters, with a mother who is very keen to have them all married off, as girls can't inherit their family home and she wants them all provided for. Enter Mr. Bingley, a handsome rich man who falls in love with Elizabeth's older sister Jane after he rents the nearest country estate, and Mr. Bingley's best friend Mr. Darcy, who is even richer than his friend. Elizabeth Bennet is probably one of my favourite protagonists of all of literature, and she's probably one of the most iconic. She reads, she walks outside by herself, and can go toe-to-toe with anyone in a conversation. Her relationship with Mr. Darcy just could not be more iconic. There's a reason that it gets adapted so many times in different forms. The conflict between the two of them is just so much fun to read.
She's not handsome enough to tempt me.
And their character development is just... The plot has twists and turns, but it's not predictable, and it's full of interesting and hilarious characters. There are lots of different marriages in this story, and you can't help but think this is Austen's way of using examples of what makes a good relationship or marriage and what makes it stand the test of time.
Allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you.
Because you have a lot of different marriages and they all show different things and they have various levels of success. My favourite Jane Austen novel is Emma. Our protagonist is Emma Woodhouse, the only Jane Austen heroine to get a book named after her. She is financially independent, and by that I mean very rich. She has a lovely life running her father's household, and she has no intention of getting married.
I have no thoughts of matrimony at present.
She is an unusual protagonist for Austen, who did say about Emma, she's a character whom no one but myself would much like. And at the time, one can see why an independent woman who doesn't want to get married. I think she's probably the most relatable for modern audiences. So all the action of the novel takes place in a village called Highbury with a wonderful cast of characters. I mean, you will find at least one character to connect with, and each character has its own sort of satisfying story arc. The thing that makes Emma stand out from Jane Austen's other novels is that it's funny. The plot is intricate, but not too complex. Although there are obviously men and romantic complications.
Good heavens.
One of the best things about this novel is the relationships between the female characters. Emma has a really lovely relationship with her former governess. She mentors the young Harriet Smith, and Miss Bates, who is the comic relief of the novel. Her and Emma have this friendship which is really tested throughout the book. I love to follow Emma's personal growth as a character, which is at the centre of the novel. She's flawed, she makes mistakes, she makes a lot of mistakes, but the joy is in seeing her redeem herself. So there's something about watching really stubborn characters get humbled. It's just spot on character development. As a side note, the new adaptation of Emma in cinemas, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was wonderful. Autumn de Wilde's direction really captured some of the humour of the novel.
Oh, Mr. Elton!
If I wasn't stuck in the house, I would see it more times.
You must sample the tart.
I hope everyone is using 2020 to read as much as they can, and hopefully this is helpful as to where to start with Austen, or a little cheat sheet if you haven't read any of them.